And to get started, I want to talk about what are the common misconceptions in HR right now, and how are you personally actively trying to shift some of those misperceptions, misconceptions, and really lay the groundwork for how we need to do the people work today.
So, KeyAnna, I can say that there's a pet peeve of mine, and that is that human resources is an enabling function. Human resources is not an enabling function. We're actually a strategic driver of the business, helping to create future capability that allows for sustainable growth as well as business performance. And maybe the thing that I try to do the most is to spend time with my leaders. I understand that the price of entry for human resources to be a credible partner is truly to understand the business, what's important, how is work accomplished, what fuels success versus creates drag. And when you speak the business language, number one, you're credible. And then introducing where we're going and what are the dynamics that affect our ability to deliver, it actually creates an open door. So at the risk of saying this is a lot of talking and a lot of conversation with my leaders, that really is the best way to change the perception of the value that HR truly contributes to the business.
And I think in that conversation too, it's also bringing to the fore what we're really here to do and being able to write that narrative. So it's critically important.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I want to jump into another question that's kind of on the same theme, and it's around just this idea of workplace norms and talking about this outdated misconception of HR. What are some norms at work that you think are a bit outdated?
Well, we're all going in the same direction now. You know, we sort of put a lot of our effort today under the header of future of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest outdated norm is thinking about organization design as organization structure.
Okay.
We have to move away from thinking about traditional hierarchies, roles and boxes on an organization chart. We need to shift from structure to thinking about skill and marrying work to skill, not job to structure.
I love this so much, and I could spend all day with you on just this particular topic, but I really appreciate that you said, let's stop thinking about the structures, because I think that's what keeps us tied to the past and how it's worked before, and getting more into the work and the skill. So thank you for articulating it that way, because I think more people really need to hear this.
Yep.
So for my next question, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you think about HR moving forward. If we've talked about the past, we've talked about working norms, how are you thinking about HR moving forward? And what do you think is going to be part of the job that maybe wasn't part of the job 5 years ago?
So what's interesting for me is that I feel our work is ever evolving. But we all have the benefit of looking back over time. 5 years ago, I wasn't so focused on future of work and all of the implications. What I think today, particularly for HR leaders, is to understand we're at a very unique period where there is a convergence of multiple factors reshaping how we think about the workforce of the future. It's not just disruption that comes from technology. In fact, you have disruption that comes from a shrinking STEM pipeline, which is critically important for my industry. We also have shifting demographics of a level that we've not seen recently. For example, millennials today have more managerial roles than Gen X. Baby boomers are comprising less than 5% of leadership roles around the world. This shift is bringing different ways of thinking about leadership and management. It's also thinking about a different ethos of how organizations should be run. So all of these factors are converging. And in HR, we've got to be able to look at where they intersect and start there to create capability and workforces for the future.
And I love that this ties so well with your idea of org design not being tied to org structure, right? Because if you're thinking about, well, what do the managers of today think like, look like, how do they move, and what is the makeup of the workforce? It's a really interesting concept to then say, well, now we're getting into generational size in the workforce. And so the same structures aren't going to work at a different scale where the manager level is now so big. And you hear a lot of organizations saying, like, we want to cut down on the middleman, but that middleman piece is part of the biggest part of the workforce.
Yes, absolutely. I think I would add to that maybe one other big point. What's different about HR today? In the past, many HR professionals have been raised on the idea of process, constructing process and systems for organizations to excel and thrive. I think we're at a time now where the fluidity is only going to increase, and creating systems and structures is going to be very difficult. So for human resources to understand what it means to help lead a workforce through a very dynamic period of change that's going to endure at least for the next decade, maybe longer, and maybe by the same token, to get comfortable in an ever-shifting environment where traditional systems just won't work any longer.
And I love that you said this note about getting comfortable, because I think for a long time, the adjacent work to HR was the equity and inclusion work. And it was all about how do we train people to have resilience, right? To be comfortable being uncomfortable. And now it just seems like that is a baseline working skill that's required across the board.
I couldn't agree more. And the concept of inclusion never goes away. It doesn't matter terminology. Having a workforce that feels that they belong, that they matter, and that they're contributing to their best ability is one of the most important things we can continue to nurture as HR leaders.
I love it. I can't add anything to it. So let's jump to our next question. How do you lead when the right thing to do isn't the easy thing to do?
Oh boy. Well, so there could be an easy answer, and maybe I'll steal from Nike and say just do it. But the bigger answer, I think, is this, KeyAnna. It all starts at the top. How leaders create both an ethos and a culture where ethical shortcuts are not expected, they're not rewarded, where the way in which you show up as a leader is vital and visible, doing the right things. When you have a surround sound that this is what's expected and everybody else is operating in a similar fashion, I think the message is don't take the shortcuts. Do the right thing the right way. And in my sector, because at the end of everything we do in my company, there are patients, there are human beings. When you remember the work is about people and patients, it also helps to reinforce that you have to do the right thing and you can't shortchange your way through making tough but right decisions.
Yeah. And what I hear in that too is it has to be woven into the culture as an expectation. Right?
Absolutely. Vital and visible.
So let's keep going here and talk about how you're preparing your workforce for a role that doesn't maybe exist yet, or you have an idea about, but maybe you're not sure, how do we get there?
Well, there's a lot of we're not sure how we get there. I think all of us maybe directionally know where we need to head. I don't know that any of us have all the right answers, but there's one thing that I'm actually very convinced about. And in fact, I would say it's not only how to prepare the workforce for the future, but it's also what that future looks like. So if I step back and I think about the resilience, so you've used this word a couple of times, and it's so relevant. In order to have resilience and in order to weather through the complexities of the change that we have happening today, it implies that people have to be ready and willing.
Yeah.
So, what do we do to help eliminate the fear factor that comes from so much uncertainty? And that is to double down on what we do know. We can provide foundational understanding of systems and technologies so they're not so foreign. And at the same time, we are proactively trying to make our employees part of the process,
Okay.
not subject to
Yeah.
the process. And so when you feel you have an element of being part of making something happen, you have a different level of invested energy. The more you can understand the foundational information about different technologies, how they're deployed, what risks they may have, you find that people have better wherewithal to navigate these complexities. And we help to unite this sense, KeyAnna, not just a purpose, but passion.
Okay.
And this is very important for us.
So much of what you're saying resonates because the company that I work for, Workhuman, we do a lot of research on the human data and the human information. And we have so many stats that back up what you say, right? About bringing people along in the process, giving them access to more information, letting them see how their work contributes to company goals, how they're helping to hit those future set milestones, really allows for people to truly buy into what's going on here and helping bring other people along that change curve. So it's so important. And I just want to reinforce the way that you're talking about it, because that is the right way to think about this.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I would also add, this whole thing about, the human plus the machine. There's a concept around digital dexterity that comes with all of this foundational understanding. But there's another piece to it, and that's trust. Trust at an individual level is really critical in order for there to be trust at an organizational level. And, you made a comment a moment ago about culture and some of the underpinnings of why culture is so critical. I don't think we can emphasize this enough. We have to be intentional and purposeful in how we create an environment of trust on an individual level and an organizational level, if we want our colleagues to stay with it, to stay engaged, to feel that they're bringing value, and that they're learning something that can actually be energizing, not scary.
Yes. And I love the idea of you go in with the right intention, but you've got to measure your impact, right? And the only way that you build that trust in the organization is to say, these were our intentions. This was our impact. Here was the delta, either positively or negatively. And so here's what we're going to be adjusting from there, right? And bringing folks along on that. How are we making decisions? How do goals pivot and change so that everybody feels like I have enough information to have the agency that you talked about earlier?
Absolutely. In a science-driven company like mine, data is so imperative. But I also feel we can't lose the human connection. Some things are very difficult to measure, and you have to be in tune. And so for us, the best approach is not to use just the data that truly helps to inform and refine, but to keep people right at the center of everything and to kind of listen to the gestalt
Yes.
of what's actually happening.